My name is Alyssa Kincaid, and on a cold Monday morning, I sat alone at the defense table while my own parents tried to prove I didn't exist. Courtroom 14B smelled of disinfectant and old paper. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above us, sharp and unforgiving. The bailiff called the case, his voice echoing through the chamber like a final warning. 6 feet separated us, me on one side, my parents on the other. But the distance felt far greater than that. It felt permanent. On the plaintiff's bench sat Charles and Loretta Kincaid, immaculate as ever. My father's posture was rigid, his gray suit pressed so sharply it looked like armor. My mother wore navy blue, pearls at her throat, hands folded neatly as if attending a charity luncheon instead of accusing her daughter of fraud. They never once looked at me. Their attorney stood and began to speak, his tone polished, rehearsed. He claimed I had stolen the identity of a deceased veteran, that I had forged documents, that I had fabricated a military career to siphon benefits I didn't deserve. According to him, my entire life was built on a lie. I didn't react. He laid out their evidence. No official military photographs, no discharge papers accessible through public records, no unit willing to confirm my service. He described me as unstable, attention-seeking, a woman desperate to be seen, a daughter clinging to delusion. They mistook my silence for guilt. My hands were folded in my lap, steady. I wasn't wearing my uniform. It rested at home in a cedar chest, folded with care. Still, I could feel it. The rough seam of an old combat patch against my skin. The memory etched deeper than fabric. Kandahar's dust. The smell of burned metal. The sound of a medic's voice breaking as I took over compressions with shaking hands. None of that belonged in this courtroom. The judge watched quietly. Her presence was calm, controlled, unreadable. I didn't yet know why my chest felt tight when she spoke, or why something about her voice stirred a memory I hadn't touched in years. I was 18 when I left my parents' house. My head was freshly shaved for basic training, my duffel bag heavier with hope than clothes. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, no hug, no goodbye. Just a brief nod, like I was a delivery she hadn't ordered. My father's last words followed me down the driveway. Just don't embarrass us. I told myself it didn't matter. I believed that if I built something undeniable, something real, they'd have to see me. I didn't yet understand how practiced they were at denial. Growing up in the Kincaid household meant affection was earned, not given. My brother Mason understood that early. Varsity sports, perfect smile, business degree lined neatly behind him like trophies. He fit into their world effortlessly. I didn't. I read too much, asked questions they didn't like, rarely smiled on command. When I enlisted, they told friends it was a phase, a rebellion. They said I was finding myself. They never once said I had joined the army. They never asked where I was deployed. When I returned 3 years later, my ribs still healing, a limp I tried to hide, they didn't meet me at the gate. I stood on their front porch in Savannah with a duffel bag, a folded commendation letter, and a bronze star pressed flat beneath my shirt. My mother opened the door halfway. "Oh," she said, "you're back." That was all. My father asked if I still had health insurance. They never asked about the convoy, about the explosion, about the nights when propane clicks sent my heart racing. Eventually, I stopped offering pieces of myself they had no intention of holding. I moved into a small studio near the river, volunteered at a trauma clinic that didn't ask questions, filed for veteran benefits through a low-cost legal aid office, benefits I qualified for, though my file carried restrictions and redactions I couldn't explain. I survived quietly. Apparently, even that was too much. The lawsuit arrived on a gray January morning. Certified mail. My father's handwriting precise on the envelope, as impersonal as a medical chart. Charles Kincaid versus Alyssa Kincaid. They claimed I was impersonating a veteran, that no one by my name had served, that I was faking PTSD for money. I should have been furious. Instead, I laughed, soft, bitter, like something finally breaking loose inside my chest. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had rewritten me, and now they wanted the law to erase whatever remained. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's refusal, a decision not to explain yourself to people who never listened in the first place. That's what I told myself as I walked into the courthouse on the first day of trial. Charcoal coat, hair pulled back, hands empty. I carried no binder, no exhibits, no prepared defense. I didn't need to prove I existed. Still, it hurt to be erased. The courtroom filled quickly. Reporters, strangers, a distant cousin I barely recognized. My parents sat flanked by their attorney, wearing concern like a costume. Their lawyer spoke smoothly, painting a story that made sense on paper. According to official records, Alyssa Concade had never served. What no one knew was that my unit in Kandahar operated under a provisional joint task force. Our movements, names, even injuries were buried beneath layers of classification. When I was airlifted out after the blast, my medevac form carried only a call sign. My discharge passed through a system that required clearance few possessed. I couldn't explain any of it. The non-disclosure agreement I signed bound me tighter than any courtroom oath. I had agreed to protect names, locations, and missions, even if it cost me everything else. So I stayed silent. Not because I lacked truth, but because I still honored the uniform. During recess, I glanced at my parents. My father sipped bottled water, jaw tight. My mother scanned the room, measuring reactions, imagining headlines. They had crafted this carefully. A broken daughter, a convincing lie. They didn't know someone else in the room remembered the same sand, the same fire, the same blood. And when that memory surfaced, everything would change. But not yet. The courtroom reconvened after lunch, the air heavy with tension. My parents whispered to their attorney, sure their careful plan would stand. But I had been holding my own truth quietly, and I wasn't about to let their narrative overwrite it. Judge Talia Mendez observed us from the bench, composed, professional, but something in her gaze lingered longer than decorum allowed. I recognized her immediately, the same Lieutenant Mendez I had carried out from the burning Humvee years ago. I had held her artery shut with trembling hands, blood slicked on my palms, mortar fire cracking overhead, and I had not stopped, even when my own ribs screamed in protest. At that moment, she was my witness, my memory, my proof, but I didn't know if she remembered. The plaintiff's lawyer continued, waving at my absent documentation. If she truly served, we would see proof, photos, records, a unit to confirm her service. Instead, we have silence. I didn't answer. My eyes rested on the judge's bench, searching for a flicker of recognition. And there it was, subtle, almost imperceptible, a pause in her posture as she recalled the past. During a brief recess, I remained seated while others filtered out. My parents huddled with their attorney, confident, smug. I wondered if they realized that the weight of the room had shifted ever so slightly. Judge Mendez's memory alone could undo years of their manufactured reality. When court resumed, the room felt different, the tension sharp, electric. My father leaned toward his attorney, whispering, assuming victory. My mother's pearl earrings reflected the harsh lights, her face tight and unreadable. They still believed their story was unshakable. Then came the question that would change everything. The lawyer, gesturing toward me, demanded, "How can we trust the word of someone who cannot produce any evidence?" Judge Mendez leaned forward, calm but piercing. "Counselor, I can tell you exactly where. She's been..." The words dropped into the room like a stone in still water. Silence rippled through the courtroom. My parents' certainty faltered. "I served with her," the judge continued, voice steady but sharp. 112th Medical Evacuation Battalion. I was the officer she saved during the Kandahar attack. I remember her hands, her voice, and the way she refused to stop even when everything around her burned. The room froze. My father's face drained of color. My mother's pearl grip faltered. Their attorney opened his mouth, but no words emerged. The courtroom felt suspended, a quiet storm of truth and disbelief. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I exhaled, a long, slow release, as if the weight of years had been finally lifted, if only slightly. They had tried to erase me, rewrite my story, and yet one woman's memory preserved it intact. The trial continued, but the tide had turned. Veterans began to show up in the seats behind me, silent solidarity in worn caps, clipped hair, eyes steady and clear. Some I knew, others I didn't. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. Their presence alone spoke volumes. I didn't turn to look, I didn't need to. Their recognition mattered more than any applause. The court clerk announced the declassification of my records. Combat reports, commendations, deployment logs, all had been cleared for release. Papers stamped with confidentiality now bore my name in plain view. Medals, deployment records, even handwritten field notes from Major Zimmer, my commanding officer. Each piece of proof arrived like a brick, restoring the foundation of my erased life. My parents' attorney objected, claiming last-minute theatrics, unfair advantage. Judge Mendez raised an eyebrow, her gaze cutting, unwavering. So was holding an artery closed in a burning Humvee while mortar fire shook the sky, she replied quietly, leaving no room for argument. By the end of the day, the lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. No public statements, no official acknowledgement beyond the legal record. Just stunned silence. My parents walked out, stiff, pale, empty-handed, their carefully constructed narrative dismantled without fanfare. I remained seated until they disappeared from view. I refused to follow. Their absence felt final, necessary. Outside, humidity clung to the courthouse steps. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but I kept my head down. I didn't need attention. I didn't need headlines. I only needed the quiet validation of survival. That night, I returned to my apartment. The cedar chest in the corner called to me. I opened it carefully. My uniform, field gloves, the coin from Judge Menendez, folded letters of commendation. A simple reminder of the truth I carried, stitched into scars and memories. Her words years earlier echoed still. Don't let them make you small. For once I didn't. News of the case trickled in slowly, buried deep in local outlets. Georgia veteran cleared of fraud after family dispute, they reported. My face appeared in one grainy photo, shadowed, head down. No story mentioned parental betrayal. No one detailed the courtroom moment when truth pierced decades of denial. And that was fine. I didn't need the world to understand. I only needed it to stop whispering. Weeks later, my parents remained absent. No calls, no explanations, no apologies. Only a formal letter arrived, perfumed, heavy, 4 sentences of distant regret scribbled in my father's precise hand. I burned it unread. Truth had survived in the courtroom. Their words were irrelevant. I relocated 3 months later. Western North Carolina, a small house at the edge of the Pisgah Forest. 2 bedrooms, a fireplace, a backyard with just enough space for tomatoes. Silence replaced intrusion. Distance became safety. Work followed naturally. A regional veterans clinic, quiet, professional, human. No plaques, no nameplates, just Alyssa, as I preferred it. My patients didn't ask about Kandahar. I didn't offer details. They only needed someone who understood. The echo of diesel, the trigger of old traumas, the unbearable sound of silence. Some days I'd watch the door, expecting ghosts of my past. My father, my mother, Mason. They never came. I heard through the clinic that Mason had taken a job in Florida. My mother still hosted charity events. I became a footnote in their story, the daughter who drifted quietly, no longer part of their script. And it suited me. Distances can be protective. One quiet Friday, a Marine veteran walked into the clinic. Mid-50s, battle-scarred, eyes calculating, hands calloused. He didn't introduce himself. He sat across from me and simply said, "You stayed quiet, didn't beg, didn't need anyone else to fight your fight." I nodded, recognizing what he meant. Survival didn't require validation. Strength didn't always demand applause. Some people noticed, some didn't. But the truth itself was enough. Later that evening, I checked the mailbox. Inside was a grainy photograph of me kneeling beside a smoking Humvee. Dirt and blood streaked across my face. My jaw set, eyes locked on a crisis only I understood. In the corner, barely legible, one word, Menendez. She had kept it all these years, not for court, not for headlines, only as proof. A reminder that the truth existed, preserved by the memory of one who had shared it. The photograph found its place on the shelf above the fireplace. Not near medals, not near the folded flag, just a quiet testament of survival and truth. Some kinds of justice do not arrive with applause. They arrive quietly, in breath, in recognition, in the simple act of living unerased. Even now, I do not measure my days by deployments or court dates. Time is marked by sunlight lingering on the porch, the wind shifting before a storm, the quiet hours of dawn when the forest is still. Time feels slower here, but in that slowness, I breathe again. Alyssa Kincaid is no longer missing. The days after the trial were quieter than I expected. The courtroom drama had ended, yet life did not suddenly feel triumphant. Victory rarely does. Instead, there was a heavy, almost tangible relief. A release from the constant erasure, a permission to exist without explanation. At home, the small house in western North Carolina became a sanctuary. The pisgah trees whispered in the wind outside my window, the creek behind my yard sang softly, and for the first time, I could breathe without scanning for threats or judgment. The scars remained, but they no longer defined me. They were simply proof that I had endured. Work at the Veterans Clinic grounded me. The people who came through the door carried silence as I once had, grief, trauma, and stories that couldn't be spoken aloud. I guided them with patience, letting them set the pace. Their struggles were familiar. I didn't share my own unless they asked, and even then I spoke sparingly. The truth was enough, and sometimes that alone was enough for someone to keep going. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, a young woman lingered after a group session. Liv, an Army Signals Intelligence specialist, her eyes steady despite her small frame. She paused at the doorway, then met my gaze. My parents, they still think I made it up, she confessed quietly. I nodded. Recognition passed between us. They won't come around, I said, but you don't need them to validate your reality. She exhaled, relief softening the tension in her shoulders. In that single breath, I recognized the freedom I had claimed for myself years ago, the moment I stopped seeking permission to be real. That night, I returned to my bench outside, framed by the stars above. Kandahar felt far away, yet its memory rested in my muscles, my hands, my lungs. The woman in that photograph, the one Lieutenant Menendez had sent me, was still inside me. Strong, unyielding, unafraid to survive. Weeks passed, and slowly I built a rhythm in this life I had chosen. The clinic became more than work. It became a community, a place where truth and survival mattered more than status or recognition. Veterans came and went, some lingering in silence, others speaking their truths like fire breaking free. I offered guidance, but never intrusion. I did not ask for their stories. They did not need mine. Occasionally I thought of my parents, but their absence no longer weighed me down. Mason's career in Florida, my mother's charity events, my father's formal letters of distant regret, all fragments of lives I had once tried to fit into. Now I existed independently. My peace was self-earned, not granted. Then, one rainy evening, a man entered the clinic. Mid-50s Marine veteran, scars etched across his face like testimony. He did not introduce himself, only spoke with calm certainty. You stayed quiet. You didn't beg. You didn't need anyone else to fight for you, he said. His words were simple but carried the weight of recognition I had longed for. He did not ask for medals, letters, or proof. He simply saw the truth of what I had endured and survived. After he left, I returned home and found the mailbox unusually heavy. Inside was a photograph, grainy and worn, showing me kneeling beside a smoking Humvee. Dirt and blood streaked across my face, hands pressed to a wound. My eyes were fixed, jaw tight, a sliver of light cutting across my shoulder like a blade. In the corner, barely legible, one word, Menendez. She had kept it all these years, not for public recognition, not for the courtroom, only as proof. Proof that the truth existed. Proof that someone else had remembered, had carried it with her, and had preserved it through the silence. I framed the photograph and placed it above the fireplace, away from medals or folded flags, a quiet reminder that some forms of justice do not arrive with applause. They arrive silently, persistently, in breath, memory, and survival. Days turned into weeks. My routine became steady. Mornings with the forest, afternoons at the clinic, evenings under the stars. I did not measure time in deployments or court dates, but by sunlight on the porch and the wind shifting before a storm. I counted life differently now, with patience and presence, allowing the slow rhythm of existence to heal the faster, harsher tempos of memory. 2 weeks later, a certified envelope arrived, tucked beneath the paw of my one-eyed rescue dog. Inside was my official discharge, honorably discharged, Enlistment 2008, Division 112th Medical Evacuation Battalion, Bronze Star with V device, 3 letters of field recognition. The paper was bureaucratic, sterile. Yet I traced my name with my fingers as if reciting a prayer. I did not call anyone. I did not post online. My parents never reached out. Perhaps they never read the final ruling. Perhaps they still believed I had fabricated it all. It no longer mattered. I did not carry their silence as a wound. It simply ceased to exist. Life continued quietly. I became a steady presence for others, never pushing my past onto those who did not need it. One evening, after a group session, Liv lingered again. "They won't come around," she said softly. I nodded, familiar with that ache, familiar with the relief of accepting it. "You don't need them to validate your reality," I reminded her, repeating the lesson I had learned the hard way. Night fell. The stars arrived unhurried, unapologetic. I held the photograph of Kandahar, of fire and blood, of survival stitched into my very bones. That woman, the Alyssa who had carried another's life on her back, was still here, still unbroken, still real. The trials, the courtroom, the accusations, all were memories now, not chains. I did not seek applause. I did not need headlines. I did not measure victory in the way the world expected. My life was measured by survival, by quiet endurance, by the knowledge that truth persisted even when the world tried to erase it. I no longer counted myself among the missing. Alyssa Concade existed fully in every small moment, in the sunlight on my porch, in the steady faces of those who understood, in the slow, deliberate rhythm of my days. I had survived being forgotten. I had survived betrayal. And I was building a life where I did not need anyone to see me to exist. Some evenings, I still sit on the bench in my backyard, watching the forest shift with the wind, stars shining clearly above. The veterans I help, the young faces like Liv's, the quiet acknowledgement of people who understand. These are my markers of time, of life, of meaning. I no longer wait for anyone's permission to exist. The photograph of Kandahar remains above the fireplace. Not a trophy, not a headline, not a story for strangers. It is a reminder that truth and survival are sometimes quiet, sometimes unseen, but always enduring. Alyssa Concade survived the war, the courtroom, and the erasure. And now, in her small house on the edge of the Pisgah forest, she finally lives, for herself and no one else.